Good morning and welcome to the Southwest Public Policy Institute's live stream panel on crime and punishment, tackling public safety in the American Southwest. I'm Megan De La Rosa, member of the Board of Directors of SPPI. Our mission at SPPI is to improve the quality of life in the American Southwest by formulating, promoting, and defending sound public policy solutions based on the principle of free enterprise, personal responsibility, limited government, individual freedom, and traditional American values. We are dedicated to delivering better living through better policy. SPPI is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. Donations to the Institute are tax deductible. Our work is sponsored by viewers like you. We invite you to consider making a contribution at southwestpolicy.com/donate. Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today: Trina Verbeck, wife of injured APD officer, and Brian McCutcheon, retired APD lieutenant. And now I will hand it over to Vice President of Research at the Southwest Public Policy Institute, Dowd Muska, who will moderate today's panel. Dowd?
Great. Thank you, Megan. It's wonderful to have everyone dialing in this morning on a Friday morning in the American Southwest. And I know we have people from all over the country and even some relatives of mine in another country. So it's great to be back with all of you fine folks again. And of course, thanks to Trina and Brian. We are going to have a discussion that is more solutions oriented because we know a lot about the nature of the problem. Of course, we're going to discuss the depth of the problem, but we have two really unique guests this morning, and their insights are going to be, I think, very, very, very valuable. I know I've been looking forward to this all week. The American Southwest is both a very safe and a very dangerous place. I've been looking through the data this week, and it's interesting. An analysis by a Oak Ridge geographer, a PhD geographer, was analyzing violent crime data from 2021, looked at the most dangerous cities in the United States. The good news is that we fare pretty well overall, but we have some cities that rank very, very highly toward that number one. Fortunately, not we don't have number one. We don't have anyone in the top 10. We do have Albuquerque. Albuquerque's number 30 at 13.9 violent crimes per 1,000 residents. The only city in the Southwest in our 8-state region that is more dangerous than Albuquerque is San Bernardino, California. Albuquerque is going in the wrong direction. A beautiful city, a lot of things going for it. We have the mountains, we have history and culture, and some of the best cuisine in America, I would humbly boast. But between 2014 and 2022, our murder rate surged from 30 to 121 or 120, depending on which numbers you're looking at. We have seen a really catastrophic rise in crime. That's a very, very serious problem for those of us like yours truly who live in Albuquerque. And I make the dark joke often. I live in a very dangerous part of Albuquerque called Albuquerque. It's been getting significantly worse in recent years. What a quadrupling of the homicide rate between 2014 and 2022. So our experts today are going to weigh in on that, how it got to be this way in one beautiful southwestern city that has so much going for it, as I said, and how we might find our way out. And of course, we're going to start with Trina, who's the wife of an officer who was injured in a very bloody incident in the summer of 2021. We are very delighted to say that Trina's husband is still with us, but that was a bad day for her family. And Trina, tell us about that very scary day in August of 2021.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me share my story. August 19th, 2021 started out beautiful, beautiful day. I was having coffee and on my phone in the backyard looking at, playing games and on Facebook, and my phone rang and our son asked me if I had heard from Dad. And our son is very level-headed. He, when I would worry about situations within the department that Mario was put in, that he always told me, Mom, Dad's level-headed. You worry too much. And I could hear it in his voice. Mom, where's Dad? Have you talked to Dad? And I instantly was like, what happened? Then he got quiet and got silent and stuff. And he said, let me call you back. And what I didn't know is that I was on speakerphone and there was another person there and they thought I already knew. And they didn't know they were the ones that, were calling me at the time. And I got off the phone. started a prayer chain, started neighbors, close friends, started a prayer chain. And then I started looking for a ride because I did not want to drive myself and I did not want my daughter to drive me. Um, and thank God there were 2 officers that Mario had worked with that thought enough to come and get me. And I will always be grateful for that because it was a mess getting there. I did not realize, I didn't know that other officers were shot. There was nothing they could tell me. I could just see the fear in their eyes when they picked me up. Um, and we got to the hospital and it was just, over 300 officers there showed up throughout the day. And when I got there, nurses, there was nothing to tell. Nobody knew anything really at that time because it was so early on. But as time went on and they were bringing families in, they moved us to a bigger room. And then I realized there were other people that were injured. And it was just kind of sad because we just all sat there. We didn't know what to do. We prayed and it was just, I don't wish that on anybody. Let's put that's there. So they had checked in with me. I knew Mario was bad. The hospital was very, upfront about he may not make it. We're not sure the extent of everything, but he's in surgery now. And the surgery seemed like it took for hours. And in the middle of the surgery, and I don't know what happened to sorry.
You're good.
Before I even knew that Mario was gonna make it, I was approached by the APD-PIO. I had mentioned earlier there were some things that I was disgruntled with APD leading up to this, and at that time, I know how the procedure is going to go down. I watched other families go through it, and I said at this time I do not wish to speak with our mayor and our chief of police, and just asked for some privacy. And within the day, the APD-PIO came in, and his words to me, this to me is what set the precedent for so much after that, was that the mayor and the chief of police have to address the families. We understand that you don't wish to see them, but we need to make sure that you're going to be respectful of the other families when they come in. And I lit into this person, and I did not stay for that meeting. They should have addressed us individually. Each one of these officers' injuries were different. Each one of their needs of their families was different. And they were going to lump us together in one place and address us all because they have other things that are more important. And it was just a big slap in the face. So with that being said, the prayers, I mean, it's if Johnny Garcia that day, I didn't find out till a couple days later that Johnny had saved his life, and that Mario he had gone to sleep. He had gone to sleep, and Johnny got him. And Johnny put his own life in danger to save a complete stranger. And my family will always be grateful for that. My husband didn't die alone, and that's a big deal. We didn't know in the beginning how extensive the injuries. We knew they were bad, but we didn't know how long lasting they were going to be. We didn't know what type of recovery. We didn't, and everybody's prayers really, really, I believe in prayer. It made a difference. It lifted him up. It lifted me up. It kept us going. Now none of this has been easy. There's a lot of stuff going on that we can't speak about. And we shouldn't have to be going through this stuff, after what has happened with him. You would think things would be a little bit better.
Certainly.
And
Just if I can just describe to our audience that on that day there had been a robbery, and a
yeah.
just sort of standard call went out for police to investigate the incident. Your husband and another officer were fired upon. We won't get into the perp. He was, not surprisingly, a young unattached male, which that's the cohort that causes most of the crime in our country. Out of California, we can maybe get into later on. He was a felon in California and should have been in jail in California and should not have been in Albuquerque that day.
Right.
Your officer and another officer were fired upon and injured in the first round, and then later another officer was injured in with his bulletproof vest, and the officer with him was injured by shattered glass. So this was a day in which 4
Mm-hmm.
police officers were injured by one perp. I mean, one completely
Mm-hmm.
out of control perp. Brian, we're gonna bring you in, and now that we set the table here. All too common, this kind of thing in Albuquerque. No one was killed that day. I thankfully, certainly a lot of those prayers seem to have worked. But boy, we're seeing more and more of this in our city of Albuquerque, aren't we? And it's not,
Yeah.
if 4 police officers can be shot at, what hope is there for just the average citizen who doesn't carry that level of respect that used to be afforded to law enforcement?
Well, the short sense is, one, it's going to get worse before it gets better if they continue with the policies that they're having. And two, there's a direct correlation to the lack of enforcement, the lack of officers. You know, the officers are working their tails off trying to get things done. But there is absolutely not enough manpower. Somebody noted the other day the officers just did a bid for the field. When I first came on in 1992, our first bid was at 380 officers, and then the very next bid was at 440. Those were officers that were working the field and separated between the 4 area commands. So our squads were, you know, they would be between 9 to 15 people depending on the time. Now they have squads with 2 officers. If you have a squad with 5 officers, that's considered a fat, well-staffed group, and a sergeant. And so it's just getting thinner and thinner, and they cannot there's no time for proactive activities. They're simply going call to call to call. And with the oversight that they've been handed with the Department of Justice being in place, the need for them to do proactive activity is severely limited because they're looking at possible termination for minor infractions. And so they have a very heavy thumb on their head right now, trying to prevent whatever it is that people think that the officers. But the problem is not the officers; it's the criminals.
No question at all. And I'm glad, Brian, you mentioned the Department of Justice oversight. I hope we have time to get into that today. I spoke to an officer last year just at my favorite deli, and he was talking about a colleague of his getting written up because he had gone over the mileage for his oil change in his squad car. And it's such a level of control with the Department of Justice oversight that certainly, as someone who lives in Albuquerque, it doesn't seem to me that the DOJ is doing a lot of good in this city. We're going to go back to Trina, though, in terms of, well, we can go in a lot of directions, but Trina, you have been, and you started off our first exchange, and I think I like to think no one is more harsher a critic of our mayor in Albuquerque than I am, but you've been very public about Mayor Keller, and I'm glad you brought up this issue of the politicking. You know,
Yes.
at the moment this happened. And before I ask a question, I just want to let everyone know who's watching. We do have a Q&A segment at the end of the show. We're going to reserve the last 10 minutes of that. So whatever stream you're watching through, or YouTube or anything, or from our website, you can submit your questions, and we will ask our Albuquerque criminal justice experts your questions. From 30 murders to 2014, when the mayor was not mayor, to 120 mayors now that he's in his second term, it's almost unthinkable that Tim Keller was reelected as mayor in the middle of this crime explosion. Where is, and we'll bring the whole city council into it. We'll bring the police leadership into this, not just Mayor Keller. You know, where are the decision makers falling down and failing the people of this city?
They don't support our officers. That was one thing from everything that went on in 2020. Whatever support was there for our officers, they lost. I do know that my own personal experiences with the mayor, when he was running for office the first time, he met with families at the APOA and addressed, about 100 people and their spouses, and there were other mayoral candidates there. And they all had, a minute to speak on, and we could speak with them. And one of the things that the mayor said is that he would get the DOJ out of here. He was very pro-police. And as soon as he was elected, he did good. He did some things. We were real hopeful. He did some things within the department that we were just like, you know what, we finally, finally got somebody. Because it's not, my family knows before this, because Mario 1 was an officer, and then we've had things happen to our family that have nothing to do with Mario being an officer in 2013, and it was under different politicians. In 2013, our oldest daughter was robbed at work with a machete at Taco Bueno. 17 years old. They're there at night. And some guy had just been going down the businesses on San Mateo, just robbing everybody. And so that was terrifying. Here your daughter, you're proud of her for being responsible and having a job, but hey, you got to make sure that she don't get cut up with a machete at work. And then our son in 2018 was almost carjacked, and if he had not drove backwards and gotten away, I do believe if him and his friend had stepped out of that car, those people would have shot him. And it was at a park. It was at a park by the ice skating rink. They were going to meet some girls at the ice skating rink. They got Subway. They were eating Subway at the park. There was a car parked in front of my son along the curb, and they had the girls move that were parked in front of my son so that they could block him in and come out with guns at them. This is Albuquerque, like on a Friday, 6:30 in the evening at a park with families. So it's not just that Mario was injured. We have lived things leading up to this, and you can't express it. Nobody cares. You can't express like, hey, this is what's going on and stuff, because people, they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe. And there's a lot of stories that people have and they just don't share. And we're tired of sucking it up. Mario and I don't want to have to move and sell my home because crime has gotten so bad here. We went out to dinner Thursday night, and we're coming home, and we're coming up to a stoplight at Manal in Louisiana going north, and there's, in the next lane next to us, there's a guy getting out of the car, and they're getting ready to have a confrontation. And Mario says, I think that guy's got a gun. And I'm like, just drive. We go to our local stores. We live in the Northeast Heights. We've been here for 15 years. We've never had the crime overrunning into our neighborhoods like it is now. You go to the grocery store, people are still in liquor. You go to Lowe's, people are still in stuff to sell. Yeah. And Mario, his first thing is he's an officer. And I'm like, no. So I'm getting to the point where I'm like, we're not going anywhere. We can't even leave our house to go to the gas station because of people fighting in the gas stations and stuff. And if you don't see that, that's great. I'd like to know where you live in Albuquerque, because that's where I'm going to go to shop and get my gas and stuff, because I have such anxiety. Not just me. I'm not the only one that has anxiety of just trying to go out and get stuff done. I dread there's so much road rage, and we don't have enough officers. We didn't have enough officers. Mario would come home, God bless him. One time he came home and he was like, yeah, well, I wrestled a guy with an axe today who was stealing packages off people's porches, and he had to wait for backup. He was alone with this person wrestling with them on the ground because they had an axe. And these are the things that we don't talk about, and Mario said at that time, because he had other instances with the DOJ, that he's like, he's like, what do my job or my life? My job or my life is what it's coming down to. And these were the conversations we had just months leading up to that. Not just us, but other officers and their spouses as well. Within the department, they know how bad it is, but they're not allowed to speak out. The SOP has now passed a thing where officers can no longer speak to the media without permission of APD. Because why do we not want the truth out there? Because the truth shows where the failure is really at. It does have a lot to do with politics. It has officers, not just here in Albuquerque, but throughout the United States, they've turned their back on our officers. And I don't support if an officer, they know they've got training, they know what their job is. And if they mess up their job because they don't follow their training and do what they're supposed to do, that's on them, and they should be held accountable, because they ruin it for all the other good officers like my husband that's out there willingly putting his life on the line for our city. And for what now? I mean, you look at it now. It's not any better. It's not, again, I don't want to have to sell my house and move and stuff, but if I can't go anywhere within my own city, and now we're seeing in the smaller towns, it's overrunning into the smaller towns and stuff.
Trina, I live probably not very far from you. I spend most of I never leave the home office apartment here, but when I do, I spend a lot of time in Corrales, New Mexico, down the road, and it's amazing the whether you've got drug addicts, and you obviously have people who are in tremendous mental health and addiction issues. Way up north where I live now, it's not all downtown in the South Valley. I mean, it is really metastasizing and perhaps even spreading out to other counties outside of Bernalillo County. It's a real, it is not a minor problem. It's probably the number one problem facing our community. Brian, I think Trina really brought up a very important issue of employee morale. Could you speak to how does it impact the officers when you have leadership from whether it's departmental leadership, or I think in particular our mayoral leadership here, who put politics and ideology above the best interest of the department, which also coincides with the best interest of public safety. The guys on the job are frustrated and angry. That one officer I spoke to about a real silly write-up over a minor 1 mile over the oil change infraction, and it also becomes a recruitment issue too. How was that felt at the ground level for our officers?
There can't be anything more demoralizing than not having the support of the city, the staff, the administrative staff, the command staff, and especially the mayor. He's at the top of the list for that. And I'll actually give an example that similar to what Trina and Mario did. Back in the mid 2000s, there was a sergeant, female sergeant on the department that was shot, and she was injured heavily enough, and just like Mario, it's going to affect them the rest of their life, physically and mentally both. And that sergeant was so afraid that the city was going to fire her because she couldn't do her job fully, and she made an appeal to the mayor and the chief. Now this would be under Mayor Martin Chavez, who, to his greatness, he's a Democratic mayor. And I was actually in the meeting, one of the meetings, where he said, we will do everything we can to make sure she retires and serves out her time as a police officer as she wants. And I would assume that's the same thing Mario would want. But now you jump fast to current times, and this mayor, his attitude towards things like this is, it seems like he's punishing society for, they seem to be assuming that stuff like homelessness and these low-level crimes that shouldn't be, in his words, should not be prosecuted and arrested, which they've done. They've actually put out orders to the police department. You cannot do petty misdemeanor arrests. You cannot do arrests for shoplifting. At one of the town halls that the mayor did recently, they put out that they would go as far as fourth-degree felonies, drug possession, things like that they would not allow the officers to arrest the bad guys for, because it was a societal problem, and they needed to come up with alternative programs besides policing to do that. So once again, if you do not have consequences, you can't know peace. And they take that away. They take the power of the officer to act autonomously. All officers are trained. Once you go out, you just find something and do it. Enforce the laws. Help the public. Be safe. And they're taking a lot of that away, to where the only way that you're going to be sure you're coming home is you don't do proactive activities. You stay out of the way. You keep your head down. You take a report once in a while, and don't respond to things, because either A, you're watching behind your back for not only the bad guys that are out in the city, but you're also now watching for the city itself, the administrative staff, your command staff. It's ridiculous. And then they're trying to play that as if that is something of a positive for the city. You ask the chief of police, Harold Medina, do you have anything to say about the large increase in just homicides? Holy mackerel. From 2014, where you had 30, up to 120 now. So, you're 3 times the amount, 4 times the amount. What do you say? His response to that every time is, well, there's an increase in crime around the country and we're just part of that trend. And it's like, really? No acknowledgement of any of the problems that are there and they, and the way they could be solved. And start looking at. But the way the city is now, they couldn't patch this together. It would take a decade of time, even if the Department of Justice was gone. It would at least a decade, because you're dealing with recruiting issues and even not just the city, the surrounding county, Bernalillo County, and other areas throughout the state, because of the liberal policies. The governor releasing prisoners. When COVID happened, we had it was about a third. A lot of folks don't realize it. About a third of the prisoners. New Mexico usually held around 7,000 to 7,500 per year was being held in prisons around the state. Now that number hovers around 5,000. And that release started happening back in 2018, 2019. And there's a direct correlation between the statistics. If you draw, put it on a graph and draw it, as bad guys were getting released from prison, the crime was going up in the exact same pattern. And they're saying that those were people that we didn't need to hold them. They were crimes without victims. They had this whole thing that they say they talk a lot like that, but it's not true. And why they think that they can try to direct things and their attitude towards things, that as if somehow society deserves to be punished for past actions in some way, or they won't explain fully, because they know most folks won't do it. So as long as they're not having to explain, I guess they don't have to answer for it. It's I don't know, it's unexplainable.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Brian, because the left's, well, I mean, you use whatever terminology you want. I mean, cultural Marxism and that sort of thing. I mean, if America is an inherently evil place, then I guess the criminals can be heroes because they're lashing out against the institutions that have done so much to oppress so many people. It is really ideology driven, and I think that's maybe our main problem with our mayor here in the city. Trina, Brian's point about, and we had a question about the judicial system. If you'd like to go to the old Dick Wolf Law and Order show, the stories about the men who catch the criminals and then the people who prosecute them. The other side of criminal justice is the prosecution side. And does Mario, do the officers he continues to know and deal with, I mean, in recent years, are they frustrated by the hard work they do on the street, only to see a failing at the prosecutorial level? Because I won't say the man's name, but from what I read, the perp in August of 2021 who did so much to cause so much trauma to your family got a very light sentence over a felony in California. Should have been in prison in California the day he was in Albuquerque. Is there a level of frustration from officers on that they're doing their job, but prosecutors aren't doing their job?
Yes, that has been brought up. The prosecutors were dropping cases. They were not meeting deadlines. They were missing information. So it was kind of it is an overall, the system is broken and it needs to be fixed. But when you don't have somebody that's got very good morals leading, this is what you end up with. And they can deny it all they want. Right after being elected, he made us a sanctuary city, which put us in direct violation with the DOJ contract. So we'll forever be under that. And then as more information comes out, we'll always be under that contract. And you look at the states that have the DOJ involvement, or the cities, it didn't improve anything. It made it worse. And so we're going to pay millions and millions forever for the DOJ, can't get them out of here. But also making us a sanctuary city has drawn, even the feds have said that it brings criminals from other states because we're lax here. We can all go and see, they roam the streets. And they're people that truly want help. I have empathy for those that have situations and they truly need help, and they get the help. There's a lot of people that get the help and they get off the streets. And what we're dealing with here is chronic, is people that have no desire to get off the drugs, no desire to get off the streets. and they're more or less just kind of given free roam of our city. People can't even keep them from pooping off on their property. You can't go anywhere without being somewhat concerned when you hear some of the stories, and not only for your safety, but the safety for the homeless themselves. Even them, there's more crimes committed amongst the homeless on each other within these encampments and these places. And officers know, because they have to go in there and take these calls. And I don't understand why people don't, our politicians making decisions, I don't understand why they don't put all of this together if they truly want it. It kind of seems like if we could get the drugs and stuff under control, but we don't have enough police to do that. And then they want to let the people, they want to attract the people like James Ramirez in here from out of state, where he was here 2 days. 2 days.
Yep.
2 days.
That was the perp, by the way,
almost.
folks. That's the perp that I've been trying not to mention. We don't want to. He's
Right.
no longer on this planet, so fortunately, we don't have to
Yeah.
go through the expense of a trial and all that sort of thing. Let me ask Brian about, and Trina, thanks for the homeless question, because I think we've been talking so much about violent crime, and people. The other angle is just not necessarily the violent crime, but the cultural decay of having people living in the streets, and those sort of petty crimes that may not be so petty if your business is the one that had graffiti or windows smashed, that kind of thing. The homeless problem, Brian, in our community, I haven't seen it worse than it is. It's as I said, it's growing up to where I live, which is pretty far, or I'm almost outside of Albuquerque altogether. You're starting to see it as you drive into Corrales. To what extent does that kind of prepare the soil for more crime? You've got the liberal progressives who think these people are worthy of compassion and that sort of thing. But it seems to me I don't see leaving these people, letting these people be and imposing no consequences for them and just bringing them food as compassion. I see that as coddling, and I see that as just sort of setting the stage for an escalation of crime to come. How much does that vagrancy problem contribute to the public safety crisis in our city?
Oh, it's right now it's immeasurable. So I was on the homeless task force in 2006 while I was on the department. And we hovered somewhere around 5,000 during the good warm months, and it went down from there to we even had one year it was around 1,500, 2,000 during the winter months that we were dealing with. The mayor and the chief of police were questioned as to how many homeless they estimate are in Albuquerque, and they refused to give an answer. Matter of fact, the chief gave a very flippant answer of, we think it's between 1,000 and 15,000 or something like that, but we don't know exactly sure. But he was very nonchalant about it. One of the things that's important to point out is at one of the town hall meetings, the mayor's staff divulged that they did a survey of like 1,000 of the homeless, and they found out that 65% of them are from out of Albuquerque. They're from out of state. They're from other cities within New Mexico, but they've come to Albuquerque to latch on and leech society with the coddling, as you put it, and they know California, in dealing with what Trina and Mario dealt with, the offender in theirs. He was already a 2 strikes offender in California, so he moved and came here, because if he'd done a 3rd strike out there, they would have put him in jail for life. We have a 2 strikes rule, but the offenses that it qualifies for in New Mexico are already life sentences. So, and the liberal Democratic State House refuses to add any crimes to that would make sense, of sex abuse, of child pedophilia, things like that 2 strikes rules you would think would be an automatic, that you would want that. They refused. That was actually brought up in this last legislative session, and they quashed it. The liberals did. The Democrats said, we're not doing that. There's constituents. There were other crimes that were attached, but they added nothing. So it's a worthless law. They wave their hands and they say, we have a 2 strikes law. Look how hard we're being on crime. And the only thing they'll allow to be on the list is crimes that are already a life sentence. So it doesn't do any good.
I see. Trina, can you talk about Mario's experience and other officers' experience on the streets dealing with this homeless problem? And I know that the mayor, the governor of California says that the typical homeless person in California is the struggling single mom doing her best to raise her children. I think those of us who actually have encountered the vagrancy problem in our country know that that's not the
Right.
typical homeless
No.
person. Officers are trained and equipped, and they have the psyche to go out every day and protect the public and catch the bad guy and slap the cuffs on and bring them to the big house. The homeless problem is a problem of severe mental illness, addiction,
Yes.
behavioral health. How maddening and frustrating is it for officers to keep getting called out for these types of calls, which through no fault of their own, they're not trained to do that. They're trained to go catch the bad guys, not deal with somebody's schizophrenia or meth addiction. It must be a daily burden for these officers.
Well, I want to they don't have doctors training, but they have ongoing training throughout the year that they get written up if they don't go to it ongoing, and they do have enough background in their training to understand that what they're facing. They do, but not enough. We put too much on our officers. We expect them to be doctors, we expect them to be the therapist, we expect the first aid, the different things that they go in to stuff. It is over the last several years, the homeless problem has gotten, I'm trying to use a good word, I guess, to say we're being overrun by it. But these officers, my point in being that they do have the training, because they do, when they meet with these people, there's officers that spend 2-3, Mario was one of them, 2-3-4 hours trying to get these people that he knows are that need help, that may have, either they're addicted to drugs, or maybe they just have a mental whatever, and they're not safe on the streets themselves. So they call the people out that's necessary. They start getting them a room, they start getting them, and more times than not, when it's time to get them in and get them going where they need to go, they don't want to go. They change their mind at the last
Right.
minute. They have that right. Our officers and the people that are there within our city that's supposed to help these homeless, we can't force them. We can't force them against their will. So not only do we not have enough officers on our street, they've taken the time to deal with these people, and then nothing happens. They're not getting the help that they need and stuff. So there is a problem, big time. What the answer is, I wish I had it. But I know that we can't keep overlooking law-abiding citizens. We can't, for this, there's actions that have made it worse. Nobody expects it to be crime free. Nobody expects us not to have any. It's reality. We know what reality is. But here it seems, been here since '98 in Albuquerque. I've grown up in New Mexico. It has just gone so, and the whole time you're watching it, you're thinking, this can't be real. They can't be. To me, it's just kind of common sense, and I don't understand. I just don't understand why it's been allowed to get as bad as it has for the sake of politics, because it is backfiring on our politicians, and they still refuse to admit it.
That's an excellent point. That was going to be my next question for Brian, because we have, I think, appropriately criticized the mayor in our largest city here in the land of enchantment. But like a lot of Western states, not like where I come from in the East, the state has a lot of control over local governments here, and funds local governments to a great extent. More if you go more easterly, municipalities tend to fund themselves and have a much greater degree of local control. At the very top here in New Mexico, the governor, her name is Michelle Lujan Grisham. She was reelected, not overwhelmingly, but I would say strongly in 2022. Whether it's criminal justice, whether it's homeless, whether it's the cultural decay here. Brian, you mentioned the legislature, the executive in a state like New Mexico. What might the difference what could the difference be with a new governor, hopefully, who recognizes these very real problems that are facing that her constituents, instead of dreaming of running the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Could change come from the governor's office?
Absolutely. It would be wonderful. I bet you would see a major change in the state if some real leadership was placed in that office. With the attitude, I find it very interesting. So she was criticized during the campaign about her views towards police and law enforcement in general. And she claimed that she was pro law enforcement and all these other things, but then all of a sudden she demands that legislation be put in place for such as qualified immunity was a big one that came through, and they tried to get that put back in place. It was taken away, so officers can now be held personally liable up to a certain amount for actions that they take. And that can be devastating. How can you be expected to do your job? I mean, doctors, judges, things like that. They say that they all have an ability to be protected from mistakes and that affecting them personally. I can't imagine an officer making a mistake and they take their house. I'm not talking criminal mistakes, things like that. The department, at least in Albuquerque, while I was there was no safety. If an officer committed a criminal act, we went after them, because any stain on your badge given by one of those people was horrible, and it would be there for the rest of your day, knowing that this person violated the law under the guise of being a police officer. And we responded to that heavily. And all officers have that. I've not met one yet that said, no, you find an officer that's violating the law, criminal, you hammer them. You do what you can. But now again, we have this attitude. So on one hand, look at what she did for the state police. She said, hey, I really support my cops. Look, I'm going to give them a little bit of a pay raise. So she gave them a good pay raise. But on the other hand, they start trying to put through legislation that they're in support of. One was no more use of canine officers and dogs. And it's like, how would you be expected to do like a building search for commercial buildings and things like that without a canine, without putting officers in greater danger? That's why the canines are there. That's what they're taught to do. And somebody who's in a building that's not supposed to be there faces the consequences of that if they get bit. But it's because it's a horribly violent thing. That's as they're putting it, it's this violence. It's society has put on criminals. They're only breaking into places because they don't have something and they want it. So we should be giving it to them. The decay of society. Look at how many Walmarts, Walgreens, that's just the tip of the iceberg of businesses that are shutting down. How many got shut down during COVID when they did that? So here's the governor using law enforcement to enforce, in my mind, very unfair practices when she shut down the state, which I think they're now really starting to see that was a big mistake. How much economic revenue was lost as a result of that? But she was using the state police to enforce that dictation, the dictates, instead of having them. You need to go out and fight real crime, and absolute misuse of power.
No, gosh, don't start us down the COVID route, Brian, because we'd go another hour on that one. Your cultural point though is very well taken, and I wanted to get this quote in. We're going to have to move on. I want to actually ask Trina about the book that she's writing about her family's experience. But 50 years ago, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, liberal Democrat who would later be elected to the U.S. Senate from New York, liberal Democrat, wrote, "A community that allows a large number of young men to grow up in broken families dominated by women, never acquiring any stable relationship to male authority, never acquiring any rational expectations about the future, that community asks for and gets chaos, crime, violence, unrest, disorder, most particularly the furious, unrestrained lashing out at the whole social structure. That is not only to be expected, it is very near to inevitable, and it is richly deserved." We used to in our country understand these sorts of things, but now I guess it's politically incorrect to talk about the decline of the family. I just needed to get that in as my own personal point of privilege for the moderator. Speaking of family, Trina, your family went through what else can it be
Oh,
called?
yeah.
Hell.
It,
An event in August of 2021. I mean, we're coming. This summer will be the 2-year anniversary. It is wonderful that, as seriously injured as your husband was, he is still with us. And I hear you are putting your thoughts together in a book form. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. Well, after when I first started posts on Facebook, I'd gotten off Facebook. I just left. I didn't watch news, didn't watch social media. And when Mario was shot and I had a lot of people trying to make contact with me, I could not get back to everybody. And there were people that I did not realize how many people that, Mario had touched and stuff throughout the years. And so I started doing Facebook posts to update people. And then I had so much support. Mario had support. But there were a lot of things going on behind the door, behind the scene that people don't know about, but they'll know about in the book. It's going to be truthful. It's painful. It's painful, going back and reliving and remembering, but it's not just our story. I know we're not the only ones that have gone through this during this time. There are others, officers and their spouses and their families, that have gone through and stuff. And it's society just seems like they're ready to turn their back on our officers. They don't understand the consequences of it, until it's going to be too late. And there are no consequences. That's what I don't understand. There's no, the only people that have consequences are officers. And anyway, so I'm going to share that. Yeah. And there's a lot of prayers. There's a lot of miracles. There are so many moments where I was at the lowest. I didn't think I could go on another day. I didn't think I had the energy to face another thing. And, God is good. God shows up. And I just want to be an encouragement to other people that I know feel the same way that I do, that have not had a voice. There's a
Sure.
lot of us that have not been able to have a voice. And, like Mario he's worried. He's right there with that lady, the other officer several years ago. He's worried right now they're going to screw him, because that's what they do. They're going to screw him out of his retirement. So we're sitting over here on pins and needles. It's like, this is what our officers get for being willing to sacrifice their lives and 18 years of service, of doing everything he could to do the right thing. And this is how we thank them. It was kind of a joke before, like when Mario would come home and he would tell me about his day, because he needed to talk to somebody, but there was no support, and you didn't talk to people within the department. And when he would leave in the morning, the joke between him and I were, well, okay, babe, just stay under the radar. He had like 2 years to retirement. We were just trying to make it to retirement. Just stay under the radar. But for some reason, when I know the reason why there's no officers, but for some reason, Mario always seems to find and attract, because he's proactive. He's a damn good cop. And he would be in these situations protecting our city. And then here comes the DOJ. They want an investigation. He had one where this guy, he beat up his girlfriend, and yes, they were homeless on a hotel voucher. And he beat her up black and blue. The hotel room is trashed. He can't leave that guy there. So they have to take him. Because he's obviously, you can't do that, whether you're homeless or not. You can't turn around and do that to somebody. And as Mario's getting him in the car over and over, this guy, every time Mario goes to shut the door, he's playing games. He sticks his leg in the way. And thank God for the lapel cam and stuff. And eventually, after, like, seriously, the 10th time, Mario, his leg got caught. Mario's got better things to stand there and wait 10 minutes to try to get you in the car because you want to play games. So now the guy's screaming. Now the guy has to be taken to the hospital. He has to be seen. He has to have medical bills. And then they say, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. So here comes the DOJ. Mario gets investigated. All this stuff goes through. You're taking all these other officers off the street now because they got to do this investigation. And Mario sees him the next day with his girlfriend walking down the street hand in hand. So what is the point for my husband to do his job, or any other officer at that point? Why? yeah, sorry.
We
you
understand.
know, I have a passion. I support our officers. I do not support the corruption within our department and the politics behind it. And we've all watched it steadily go downhill through the years. And right now, it's at the worst it's ever been. I don't care
Clearly.
how they try to portray it on the news. We're living it. We see it with our own eyes. We know the truth. We need them to stop lying to us. And you're the one that invited all these people here. You need to figure out something that's actually financially feasible to take care of these people instead of putting them out on the streets for the rest of Albuquerque to work with. I don't think these people that are making the decisions, they must live in fancy houses somewhere and they're not touched by this. They don't see this when they go out to this, or they obviously don't do their own shopping or do anything. I'm sure they've got fancy people to help them, you know, do their cleaning and all the good stuff that they can afford right now.
It must be wonderful living in that bubble.
Yes, that was
Never
my
having.
point. Living in the bubble. They're not
Yes.
because if they were living down here with us, they wouldn't be making the choices. They would be helping us and putting the law abiding citizens first.
Sure.
And all they're doing when they put those homeless people above us, all they do is make us over here go, why are these people more important than us? And then we create, well, I'm not going to have compassion, you know, you hear for these people, because look at all that they get. Look at, you know, it's messed up, it's mixed up, and we need help. And there's people that the mayor says he hires within his office that have the capabilities of helping get this stuff figured out. But yet here we are 6 years into our mayor, and then we're hearing that he's going to run again. There's whispers that he's going to run for a third term.
Wow.
You know,
That'll get me out of Albuquerque.
I would be like able to chalk this up to times. I wouldn't so much continue to speak out if things at least became stagnant. They're not even like topping off. We are steadily increasing. No matter, every day there's a murder, every day, you know, and the correlation is our gangs and our drugs. They don't want to address those things within, because they have to admit to people when they're coming for Balloon Fiesta, or when they're coming for all these fancy things that they want to have within the state, that, you know what, we have a crime problem, be careful. They don't want to admit that. They want everybody's revenue, but you can't keep people safe. You can't keep their stuff from getting stolen at these hotels. I mean, every time we had friends that came to visit. We had dinner with them a year or two, maybe 4 years ago, before this happened. And they got their car broken into, you know, and they're, bless their heart, they're calling Mario. What do we do? And he's like, you got to call. You probably never get your stuff. They stole the guy's blood pressure medicine. You know, he's out of town trying to get a doctor to fill his thing. And we're just supposed to accept this as the norm. You know, and then you have security guards, you have people that are businesses trying to fill that gap, and the security guards are getting killed, you know. Or you have the owner of the pizza parlor here that was protecting his employees, and he got killed. Sure. And he was a good guy. I know him. He used to come in and get his hair cut where we all worked, and we knew him, and it's heartbreaking because we knew his intentions were to protect his employees. And you know, it's and they do say, I do want to touch on that. I am so sick and tired of hearing everybody from the top say, oh, it's like this everywhere. You know what?
I think we lost Trina, folks. We've been having a few technical glitches this morning, but we're muddling through. We are desperately low on time. We only have about maybe 5.5 minutes left. If Brian is still with us, I'd like to ask him, the average homeowner in Albuquerque, the average citizen in Albuquerque, the average small business owner, these issues seem overwhelming. What can an average citizen do to get involved? Is it something as simple as, you know, meeting the local officers assigned to your region, joining the neighborhood watch? What are some practical things that a person can do that will have an impact in light of the fact that leadership in our city and our state is so ineffective.
I think very much when the police can't handle it, then it's your responsibility as a citizen. Now, I'm not advocating vigilantism, but being aware, especially like you were talking about neighborhood organizations and things like that. I know one specific organization down in the South Valley where they actually organize the neighborhood watch, and they do patrols, and they actually walk. They get together, they have flashlights, they have radios, and they walk 3 or 4 at a time. And you know, they all have their concealed carry, which I do feel is very important, especially in today's world. All my family, myself, we are all concealed carry licensed to do things like, you know, make sure. And the primary reason you want to do that is be able to protect yourself. Right now, the police, their hands are tied at the street level. And you can't expect there to be a police officer who responds quickly, number one. Number two, I think the story was in the news a while back where City Councilor Luis Sanchez actually saw a man who was armed with a gun out in front of his business out on the west side. He called police, and they never did send somebody out. They were asking him to stand there and watch the guy, and when the guy walked out of sight, he said, "Hey, I can't see him anymore." He walked into an apartment building, and they said, "Okay, thanks," and they never dispatched an officer out there. And so how they're looking at things is not right. It's not saying we're going to protect society. Again, right up earlier, it seems like they're almost punishing society for you know, wanting to be safe in some way or form. Somehow it's our fault that the criminals need to be allowed to victimize people that are around. But as for your own safety, be aware. Don't do things. Don't be places where you shouldn't be. Don't do things late at night when you're shopping at the malls and things. Don't leave things in your vehicle that would be attractive to burglaries. They're dealing with daily multiple burglaries, shoplifting. That's, you know, a lot of those businesses that are shutting down. Some of the hotels are even shutting down because the homeless problem has gotten so bad. And what is, instead of I know the mayor personally was questioned about that at a business meeting, and he advocated that the businesses should have cameras, and that'll help with your homeless. And they said, well, how? If we can't get the police to come out and enforce them being vagrant and being on our property and defecating and doing things they shouldn't be doing, vandalism and such, how is a camera going to help? You're not going to take the camera footage and then prosecute them. And the mayor refused to answer. He wouldn't give anything more than that. And so it's very obvious through his actions. Whatever he's saying about trying to support law enforcement is manure. And so as citizens, if you want to be safe in your own house and in your own neighborhood, get to know your neighbors. Go out and talk to them and get that. I have that in my own neighborhood. We're on a phone system where we can call and say, hey, I saw a vehicle, you know, sitting in front of Bob's house over here. Anybody know anything about it? And we're very vigilant in being there. And especially for the folks that actually have to work. I'm lucky enough to have, I'm only part-time employed and partially retired. And so I'm home a lot more often, along with many of my neighbors. So we know who those people are that are there through the day. And we call each other constantly saying, hey, I saw a vehicle pulling in here. Anybody know who that is? You know, and verifying things. You have to be aware and start making changes, because if not, it's, you know, the strategy is you make it harder for a bad guy to come into your neighborhood and do something than to go to the neighborhood next door, because the police, they're not going to have the ability to take them off the street. So you just want to make sure that they don't want to come to your neighborhood because they know you are watching and something will happen.
Excellent advice from a law enforcement professional. We're going to have to wrap things up there, folks, because we are seconds away from being cut off. Be proactive, be aware, build your community. It's something that in our country, we used to know our neighbors not that long ago. Great advice from Brian. Thank you, Trina, for all of your contributions. And of course, I'm sure I speak for everyone in sending our best wishes to your family, what you folks have been through. And I think something good's going to come from this, because
every
You're going to
day's a
write a
good
book,
day.
and a lot of people are going to
Yeah,
read that book, and it's going to be
yeah.
wonderful.
Well, and
Thank you to our guests,
bless you.
and thank you for our viewers, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be back next Friday. Southwestpolicy.com, southwestpolicy.com. The only way we can bring you programming like this is if you contribute to us. We are a nonprofit organization, and we are not, unlike National Public Radio, we are not funded by tax dollars. So thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you in the weeks to come. Thanks so much. Check us out at southwestpolicy.com. Have a great weekend.